Dear you, there was a stretch of time when you kept telling yourself, "I'll feel better once this passes." The strange part was, you didn't know what this actually was. Nothing was clearly wrong. Nothing was clearly right either. You just felt like you were standing in a hallway between rooms, unsure which door was meant for you, unsure whether you were supposed to move or stay still. Life kept happening around you. People talked about plans. Days filled themselves. Seasons changed without asking how you felt about it. And you kept waiting, not dramatically, not desperately, but quietly. Waiting for clarity, waiting for motivation, waiting for something inside you to click into place. You noticed it most during ordinary moments. Standing in line somewhere. Sitting alone with your phone. Driving without music. There was a gentle emptiness that followed you. Not painful enough to panic, but persistent enough to feel unsettling. You weren't sad all the time. You weren't hopeless. You were just suspended. As if your life had paused emotionally while the clock kept moving. You tried to be patient with yourself. You told yourself everyone goes through phases like this. You reminded yourself that not every moment needs to feel meaningful, but some days, patience turned into doubt. You wondered if you were missing something important. You wondered if you were falling behind without realizing it. You wondered if this quiet waiting was actually fear wearing a softer disguise. You didn't talk about it much because it sounded vague when you tried. "I don't know what I'm waiting for." Didn't feel like a real problem. It felt indulgent to even bring up. So you kept it to yourself, assuming it would resolve on its own. And yet, the waiting continued. You still showed up to life. You still responded when needed. You still smiled at the right moments. But inside, you felt like you were holding your breath, not in panic, but in anticipation. Like you were bracing for something unnamed. And the longer you waited, the more you questioned whether that something would ever arrive. If you're reading this and feeling a quiet sense of recognition, it's because many people experience this pause without language for it. It's not laziness. It's not lack of ambition. It's not dissatisfaction. It's a moment where the inner compass goes quiet and you're left listening for a direction that hasn't revealed itself yet. And that silence can feel heavy, even when life looks full. Waiting without knowing what you're waiting for is one of the most uncomfortable emotional states. It feels unproductive, directionless, slightly shameful. Our minds are trained to believe that if we're not actively moving towards something, we must be doing something wrong. So when stillness arrives without explanation, we struggle to trust it. Your past self understands now that this waiting wasn't emptiness, it was transition. You were between versions of yourself. The goals that once guided you no longer fit, but new ones hadn't fully formed yet. Your old motivations didn't disappear overnight. They simply lost their pull. And when motivation fades without replacement, it leaves behind uncertainty that feels like stagnation. You weren't unmotivated. You were unaligned. There's a difference. Alignment changes quietly. Values shift, priorities rearrange. What once felt urgent starts to feel optional. What once felt exciting starts to feel hollow. And when that happens, the inner system slows down, not to punish you, but to prevent you from running in the wrong direction. But slowing down is uncomfortable in a world that rewards momentum. So you judged yourself for it. You compared your internal pause to other people's visible movement. You wondered why you couldn't just pick something and move forward, even if it wasn't perfect. What you didn't realize was that forcing direction during misalignment often leads to deeper dissatisfaction later. Your past self sees now that the waiting was actually a form of listening. Your mind and body were asking for space to process experiences you hadn't fully integrated, to grieve expectations that no longer made sense, to reassess what you genuinely wanted instead of what you thought you should want. This kind of waiting doesn't come with instructions. It doesn't come with reassurance. It doesn't come with timelines. That's why it feels so unsettling. You also carried a quiet fear during this time. What if nothing comes? What if I'm just stuck like this? That fear made the waiting feel heavier. It turned neutral stillness into self-doubt. And without guidance, self-doubt fills the gaps. But your past self understands now that clarity rarely arrives on demand. It arrives after enough space has been created for it. And space often looks like uncertainty before it looks like direction. You weren't delaying your life. You were preparing to choose it more honestly. Once you understand that, the waiting stops feeling like a flaw and starts feeling like a necessary pause, a recalibration that couldn't be rushed. Right now, if you're in this place of waiting, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not wasting time. You are allowed to not know what's next. You are allowed to feel uncertain without panicking. You are allowed to pause without explanation. Waiting doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something is forming quietly beneath awareness. And while it may not feel productive, it is often deeply necessary. You don't need to force yourself into movement just to feel normal. You don't need to make big decisions to prove you're still progressing. You don't need to pressure yourself into clarity. Direction that's rushed often collapses later. Instead, you can stay curious. What feels heavier than it used to? What feels less important now? What do you no longer want to return to? Sometimes knowing what you don't want comes before knowing what you do, and that knowledge matters. This season won't last forever. Waiting isn't your permanent state. It's a passage, and one day, without a dramatic shift, you'll notice that something feels different. A small pull, a subtle interest, a moment of resonance. It won't announce itself loudly. It will feel natural, familiar, like recognition rather than discovery. And when that happens, you'll move, not because you forced yourself, but because it finally feels right to. If you're reading this and feeling understood, it's because this experience is shared by more people than you think. Many are quietly waiting too, even if their lives look full from the outside. And there is comfort in knowing that uncertainty doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're between what was and what will be, between habit and intention, between motion and meaning. Take a slow breath. Let the waiting soften instead of tighten. Let yourself trust that this pause is not punishment. It's preparation. You don't need to have answers today. You don't need to explain your pace. You don't need to justify your stillness. You are allowed to wait until something inside you says now. And when it does, you'll know. Sincerely, you.